about culture. How do you maintain your culture even when you grow your operations? There are representatives in here from agencies large and small. Some have been around for decades, some are just starting out. And it's obviously something that's important to all of us. I want these two gentlemen right here are from two distinguished agencies. Why don't you start out by introducing yourself, and why don't you tell me, what does culture mean to you?
All right. Hello, everybody. First of all, Chris, awesome job with the event. Had a ton of fun.
Thank you so much.
And he also stepped up to be our moderator for this panel, too. So we kind of got him out of his comfort zone. So thank you for
You're welcome, Ryan.
Putting this on. My name is Ryan Iwamoto. I'm the president and co-founder of 24 Hour Home Care. We are a non-medical home care provider that focuses on Medicaid, IDD, and private pay business. And on the question of culture, so for me, culture, I see it as an outcome. There's no action plan for it. There's no set of like actions or activities that drive it. Really, it is the result of something that comes through your actions and activities towards your people. So if you really want to change your culture or influence your culture, you got to change those activities that influence it, right? So if you want to change your culture, change the people that you hire. If you want to change your culture, change the people that you, or change the way that you pay, change the way that you orientate your people. And it sort of goes to that, like, and you've probably seen on Instagram, the little diagram of the iceberg, right? Culture is the little visible tip that you see, but it's all those activities and actions that you focus on your people that really drive it.
1968, my mother founded the company 55 years ago. I'm second generation. Been doing this myself for half that time, 27 and a half years. Apparently I'm learning that this is a big deal, that we do 40,000 hours a week of care, and we're in Maryland and DC. So it's a pretty tight geographic area, and just been doing this a long time. So our company is not as exciting as some of the others. When you hear private equity, you've gone from X to Y, and so 55 years and 60 million in revenue, it's only $1 million a year in growth. It's not that glamorous. But that's who we are, that's what we do, and we love it. So I'd say, you know, our journey has been my mother, then myself, and I kind of rose to that Peter principle of my level of incompetence a few years ago. So now I have a president who runs the majority of the day-to-day of the company, and so I have a glorified title as CEO. And here I am. So anyway, and then the culture, of course, it's just, joking aside, I mean, we're all about the caregiver. We are a very, very caregiver-centric company. Have always been that way, didn't know any other. And because that's who you are, the way you do things, you happen to go through a pandemic, people are like, wow, that guy's smart. He has a caregiver culture. But that's what we've done. That's how we've always sort of rolled. And just me personally, like philosophically, you know, I've always kind of rooted for in our market, you know, they're lower wage income earners, and it's just nice that we can make more of a difference in our corner of the country that makes their life different than what it otherwise would be.
Gotcha.
I could say a lot more, but I know we got time.
Yeah, let's talk about caregivers for a second here. So I found this quote: "Culture is to recruiting as product is to marketing." So Ryan, you know, it's not front page news that turnover is a big issue in the industry. How does your company's culture kind of address that issue, and how do you measure its success?
Yeah, I love the quote, by the way. Very good question, and I think to simplify it for this group, for me, it really comes down to three things that we do. And I think the first thing goes to what you said in your question, is measure it. I think you have to measure your retention with your caregivers. And I would say most people here, probably in this room, measure it at the company level. But how far down do you go measuring it with your branch offices, your individuals, right? And hopefully we have individuals that manage or own the relationship with the caregiver. And I really do think by having that visibility of that data, it can help you make the decisions that you need to do for retention, right? So like, you know, it's one thing where your company has a retention percentage, but if you can see it at the individual level, certain things come from that. You can see, wow, this person does a really good job of retaining their caregivers versus maybe some other areas. So I think you can really learn some best practices, and it's one thing to say, hey, you need to have better caregiver retention. It's another thing where you see your peers, you're like, wow, how are they doing that? Let me go talk to them and see what they're doing. So I think that's number one. Number two, family caregivers. Bill Dombey mentioned that in his presentation. We're big believers in family caregivers, and I mean, that is the ultimate sticky caregiver that you can get, is someone that is selected by the family or maybe even a family member of themselves. And I really do think it solves some problems that we have, right? We all know we have this caregiver scarcity issue, and it's only getting worse. 10,000 people are turning 65 every single day. The number of caregivers to elderly ratio is going down. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have this growing group of family caregivers that are going unpaid. Right? And I think I just looked it up last night to see what the number is, but the market value for unpaid caregivers, $600 billion.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Put that in context. That's more revenue than Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and it's 4 times the amount of the market spend for home health. Right? And so you have these two problems that are growing on two ends of the sides. You know, I do believe that those two problems could be solutions for each other, and that's why we're big believers in family caregivers.
Gotcha. Cool.
And then the third one, and this is probably really basic, but really two core pillars of caregiver retention really falls on pay and consistency of work. If you don't have those two things down, or a strategy to really focus in those two basic areas, all the other stuff doesn't matter, right? I had talked to a lot of different companies, and they have so many different initiatives on how to retain their caregivers, but they're not even pricing the pay for the caregivers is not even at market. So it's hard, and I think the CEO of Taco Bell talked about it. Like, you got to at least be in the market to be competitive, and you have to have consistency of work. And I think on the private pay side, that's becoming harder and harder because it's just being more challenging for people to pay for it. But if you don't have a strategy to have consistent work for your caregivers, it's going to be very hard. And all the other stuff that you try to do around it doesn't really matter.
Gotcha. Neal, you just talked earlier about really being laser focused on making sure that you're taking care of your caregivers, right? How do you attend to the emotional well-being, the emotional needs? How is that baked into the culture at Family Nursing?
Wow. Well, just one other thought about culture I want to mention is I think, especially the theme of Run DMC and of innovation, but also we've heard a lot about collaboration. And I have personally learned so much about what to do better or what not to do, and pick the brains of others. And I mean, Ryan and I had met a couple of years ago at a conference, and then since then we've had some, so learning from each other, to me, best practices. I get frustrated with those that try to protect the secret sauce. I mean, it's not that secret. Get a great caregiver in the house, right? I mean, it's not that secret, but how you go about doing it, yes, everyone has their, but even if you give out the playbook, so I've drawn the analogy with, you know, the Patriots and all their years of winning, and the other team, the Jets and the Dolphins, like, they see the film, there's the playbook. But to execute in this business is so hard, so hard. So anyway, collaboration to me is also part of culture. Now, can you remind me of the question?
No,
I just didn't want to forget that.
No, it's okay. No, it was just like you were talking, I mean, earlier, and also outside of this room, you and I have been talking about how you were really focused on making sure that you are taking care of your caregivers.
Oh, right.
And it was like, how do you bake into family and nursing care's culture making sure that you're taking care of your caregivers, their emotional well-being, their needs in that respect?
Yeah. Wow. So we do a lot of things in that regard. We have, there's no magic bullet. There's, I would say, dozens or 50, hundreds of little things that sort of bake into that cake of, at the end of the day, the thing I'm most proud about is, so one of the things we do is we survey our caregivers. What are they telling us about us? How else are we going to know what they're really feeling? One of the methods is surveying them, and then the response, and it's sort of benchmarked against the industry and on, not through Home Care Pulse, it's a different, anyway, so they come back and they say, what are you most, or I'm most proud of, I'm most proud that I work at family nursing care. That's like scores in the upper 90-ish percentile. And me, I'm very proud of that because they have choices. And the fact that they're biggest, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, they're very proud to work at our company means a lot. So just a couple other things we do. We have like a caregiver advisory council. So we have, every year we cycle like another 12 to 15 out, and every quarter we meet with them, and they're paid to be there, of course, but also we really like tell us unfiltered what you're really thinking, what you're feeling, and how can we as a company do what we're doing better. We do this on a monthly basis with a much bigger group, like 75 to 100, like we call meet and greets, but it's now over Zoom. And those that come in, we feed them. But so it's just constant feedback. It's not, I've said this a lot, it's not what do I think how the company's doing, it's how our number one customer, our caregiver, feels about how we're doing. And oh, by the way, how the clients, as a result of how they're feeling, they're gonna usually feel much better about who we are as a company.
Gotcha.
And I'll double click on the collaboration. We met at one of the conferences, and we've probably chatted 3 or 4 times, try to pick each other's brain on best practices. And I think one of the things I took from Neal's company is they create ownership of the client and also the caregiver, which is really cool. A lot of the models that we see is like, you have a sort of a staffing person that sort of owns both relationships, but they really separated that. And I do think that's an important part of retention with caregivers, and we've heard that in our feedback, is just having someone to go to for coaching, for creating, developing their skills to help navigate this sort of challenging world of caring for somebody. It could be tough. A lot of us all have coaches ourselves, athletes have coaches, but caregivers. I mean, I think that's probably a very ripe opportunity to have coaching for the caregivers, and it's something that we stole or collaborated from Neal.
Okay, cool.
I love you, man.
Oh, he stole some stuff from us too.
That's true, I did. And many of you out here, so thank you. You're making me all look good, or I'm trying to look good. But,
This question is probably for the both of you, but do you remember when you were first starting out, you had that passion, that fire, that drive to really start something new, to get something off the ground? I know, Neal, you come from a family business, but you did come back to the East Coast from the West Coast. You were living in this area at the time. So you had that drive and that passion, but then oftentimes I think once we start scaling operations and looking to grow our businesses, we can lose sight of or kind of forget that passion. How do you keep that drive alive, keep that fire lit, and maintain it even while you're growing operations, you're acquiring new clients, et cetera, et cetera? How do you do it?
me first?
Sure.
So I don't know if it's teachable. I'll start with that. I know people say it is, but I don't know. So for those of you who were here a couple of nights ago and you were at the bar and you were hanging out with the Hall of Famers, and I had the opportunity to ask some pretty deep questions through the alcohol, and so it got deep. No, but kidding aside, I mean, they are. They're excelling in their craft, and how do they do it, and what did it take? And many of you are probably familiar with Kobe Bryant and the Mamba mentality, and I just think it's like a mindset. Like, I don't feel like we compete against others. I feel like we compete against ourselves. And I'm not trying, just how I feel. Like, I don't think, so the midnight oil and burning and drive and all that stuff, I think it just sort of comes from like being an insanely competitive person, for one. And then and the other part of that is, since we've been talking a lot about the 80s here on this thing, is you guys probably remember the Karate Kid and Mr. Miyagi. Balance, Daniel-san, balance. And in all sincerity, I mean, to me, it's very important, because I define success differently than how much money I have in my pocket, but just the relationships with my children and my wife and friends and other activities and things that are beyond is my love of the work that I do and the passion behind that. So, but anyway, as we scale, I'm kind of all over the place, but I just think it's being aware that, especially in my world, there's no playbook. There is no playbook. I can't watch the film because there's no company that does apparently my size in one area. And so I just have to keep reinventing myself. And that's where It's the people. You surround yourself with people that really actually are better than you. No one wants to admit it, or people say, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. But then to really actually do it, and they really are skilled in their areas, and they are more talented than you would be in that role. Even though I've grown up in the company, and I know that it's humbling, but it's amazing. Yeah. And I love it.
All right, before I jump into that, he brought up Karate Kid, so I want to share something. This is not planned.
Oh boy.
So my uncle was the Japanese villain in Karate Kid 2. Well, he's not, well, let me take a step back.
Get out of here.
I didn't put it in the book, the home care innovation form book, because he was married into the family and then they divorced. So he's no longer my uncle, but there was a point in time where he was my uncle. So random
look
fact.
at that. Yeah. Totally unscripted.
Unscripted. No, it just sort of sparked a place in my brain there. Yeah, well, I think just to share a quick origin story. So started the company in 2008 when I was 26 years old with my partner, David Allerby. And yeah, no, I remember the days. I mean, we were doing all the work. We were pretty much, it was just the two of us, just really grinding it out. But I would say the hardest thing that, the biggest leap for us, and I would say the biggest leap for most entrepreneurs, and I think there's a lot in the room here today, is going from doing the work to now leading. Right? So like, and I think anyone that was an individual contributor that now sort of jumped into the manager, it's tough. It's going from doing the work to leading the work to be done, and it's a different skill set. And not everyone has the skill set, and some people can develop it. So that has probably been the biggest jump for me, is really being able to let go. But I think to what Neal said, the most important thing is really finding the people. People that are better than you, people that are smarter than you, and that can complement your weaknesses to help you continue to grow. And I think that's probably been the number one thing that we've done, is surround ourselves with those types of people to help us grow. If you are the smartest person in your room, that is not a good sign. Right? So we want to make sure that you're not the smartest person in the room. And yeah, I fulfilled on that mission.
Because we're not scalable. I mean, individuals are not, you can't scale yourself. Well, maybe with Chat G, you eventually can. But at the moment, you know what I'm saying? Like, we can't be in 3 places at the same time. Right.
Well, I think one thing I'll also add too, just on leadership, and this is, you guys probably will not like me for saying this, but I feel like leadership is actually a little bit overrated. Except for you guys. You guys are all great. You guys are awesome. No, but just leaders in general, I think it's a little overrated. You go to any bookstore, you go on your LinkedIn, all you see is articles on how to be a great leader. Here are things to do, 5 tips to be a great leader. But honestly, like I really feel like how we were able to scale and grow is not necessarily the leader here. To me, I think the most critical employee to scale, do you guys know who that is?
Let's hear.
It's the frontline manager. And I think it was mentioned in the last presentation, or 2 days ago. But it's that branch manager, that executive director, that person. If you can get an A+ player in those roles, they are going to help you, right? The leader, yes, they're going to create the vision, but it's going to take those 10, 20, 50, 100 frontline managers to help do the blocking and tackling, football reference.
Nice.
To really execute on your initiative. So I really do think like those are the employees. So yes, if there's one takeaway, really, really make sure that you have A+ players in those roles.
Well, I'm going to stick with you just for a second.
Yeah.
And let's talk about leadership for a minute. And if you're not the most important person at your organization, why don't you give me an example? Maybe the both of you can do this. Give me an example of when you missed the mark in the development of your culture, when you kind of screwed up, and what did you learn from it, and how, if you can, how did you integrate that knowledge into your culture at your organization?
Go ahead, Neal.
Didn't tell us about this one, but anyway, that's fine. I would say every day, I know I'm going to screw up. So I kind of know that, and I know.
He sets the bar really low.
Right, yeah. So it's already, look, guys, let me just make it really clear. When you're hired, I'm going to mess up. No, but in joking and not joking aside, I mean, I do make a number of mistakes all the time. I know that. And so my job, one of my jobs as a leader is I try to earn what I call trust deposits in my employees. Like, I know it's not like if you're into gambling and you're winning the money and the chips are sitting there and you're like, and I'm like, I know I'm going to mess up enough times. I'm going to have to cash some of these chips in so I don't lose them. But I also know that, I just think inevitably you're going to go through periods of time where you make horrible decisions. You think they're brilliant decisions and you do all your part and you get the buy-in, and it just goes the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And that's happened countless times at my company, and it's gotten to be a joke now at this point. I'm like, oh, is he cashing in the chips right now? Because I know, like, here we go.
That's good.
So you just kind of know it's going to happen, and then your people kind of know to expect it.
Yeah, I think for us, we've made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I think it's learning from them that makes them not mistakes, but also sort of building blocks to success. And I think the biggest thing was just really always like leading from the top. So we would always have our strategic meetings. We would come up with our ideas and like what we thought was going to be what's going to drive the company forward, and then we would like sort of push it down to the individuals. And the model maybe worked for the first 5 years, but at some point when you get big enough where I think you lose touch with a lot of the employees. Right? There's a point where you don't know every single employee in your company. Right? There was that point where I did know everybody in the company. So you have that relationship. They're along with you on the journey, but it gets to a point where you don't have that. So I really do think just making sure that they know exactly what the North Star is and how can they play a part in doing it. Right. So like, you guys can go on our Glassdoor reviews. Like now it's pretty good, but there was a point in time, I would say like maybe about 5-7 years ago, we were getting slammed. Like every person was just like, oh, these owners are terrible and they're money hungry and they don't really care about our people. Because we didn't really have any sort of we didn't have a mission, we didn't have a purpose. Probably for the first 6-7 years of the business, we were just trying to continue to move forward and grow. And when you don't have the relationships with the employees that you used to have, because you just don't see them anymore, right. They're going to fill that void with probably the worst case scenario, and hence why we got a lot of those bad reviews. So yeah, 6-7 years into the business, we're like, oh, maybe we should have a purpose. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should have some core values that they can lean on, where if they don't know who we are, or maybe they need to make a decision and no one else is around, they have these guiding principles that can help. So I think really about being intentional of setting that for your company, and it's something that we didn't do, and eventually learned that we needed to do it 6-7 years into the
right.
business.
When it comes to culture, what is your organization? It's obviously much more than a mission statement that's on the wall in the lobby or the break room, whatever, something that was cooked up at headquarters or something like that. Ryan, you've said it's all about getting to why. Yeah. And also, sub-question would be, how does Neal get into your Rolly Club?
All right, let me break that question down first.
That's a loaded one. No,
yeah. I think he's already part of the Rolly Club, to be honest. So to sort of piggyback on the story that I was sharing is that we didn't have a purpose, we didn't have a why. We sort of did internally, but again, if you're not sharing it, people don't know what it is, and again, they'll fill that void in for you. So I think with our why, it's impacting people's lives by making a difference every day. And people is not, yes, it's our clients, but it also is our caregivers, and it's also our colleagues, and it's also our community. So every single day we have an opportunity to really impact any of those set of individuals. And I say during this last pandemic, I think we added one more, which is ourselves. Mm-hmm. Really focusing on ourselves to make sure we're impacting ourselves too. So it took 6 or 7 years to do that. And I think one of the ways that we look to continue to drive that is not just what's the company's why, but what is your individual why? Mm-hmm. And so we have every employee, if they're comfortable, share why they got into what they do. And I'll be the first one to share. My why is my grandmother. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2005, and we had the struggle of finding caregivers for her. And we were fortunate. I was in the business. I was working in healthcare, actually for Maxim Healthcare. And shout out to Jared, who was actually my regional manager when I started. Always good to see him. But yeah, I was in the business, and it was still very challenging. So thought there could be an opportunity there. And I have also seen the magic of home care as well. She lived in her home with the caregiver from when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's all the way until she passed away 2019 in her home. And she lived to be 101 years old. So she was our testimonial for the longest time of the magic that home care can provide. So I think it really is having the why, having the purpose, having your North Star, but also how can you tie your employees into that purpose as well through their own personal why. And I think that's really helped us. And again, the bigger you get and the farther your employees get away from actually the care being provided, you have to be more intentional about doing those types of things, or they're just going to be at a desk looking at names. And so, yeah, that's a big part of what we did.
I feel like I have to piggyback on that because it's like a perfect segue
I
about.
can see you.
So you hear that, and then like, how do you actually execute that in your day to day? And so, you know, we stole from Marriott. This is a Marriott thing where it's a weekly stand-up meeting, and every week everyone gets on Zoom from everywhere in the country. So even though we're central, where our location is, people have moved out of the area, and anyway, so we're on Zoom and we go through every week. We have 15 guiding values, and every week we discuss or an employee, somebody they volunteer and they tell us the week before, okay, I want to do the next guiding value. So one of our office employees does a guiding value, speaks to it, and speaks to how they live it in their work that they do. And so every 15 weeks, we're regurgitating and we're going back to the first one and the second one. So it's like a drip, drip, drip gets into their DNA in a way that is subtle, it's consistent, they're hearing it again, and then maybe the next 15 weeks later, it's a different department giving their world of how it gets into, you know, how they are doing what they do. And so that's been incredibly effective. And because some people say, God, I have these amazing mission and guiding values, and how do I really it's working. It works. It really does. And I'll come out and say I'm proud of that. So that's good. And the other thing during this weekly stand-up is our philosophy is to lead with a carrot, not with a stick. So every week we share at least one, and usually more than one, but a compliment that a client gave about a caregiver, and we highlight it, and we take the word by word they still write old school letters, or it's in our surveys, or just the communicate. So that, and then we also have our employees, we call them catch a stars, and if somebody finds another employee that did something that was impressive or a great idea or over and beyond, they get recognized publicly, and of course, we give them gifts and shower them with gift cards or whatever it is that they want. So there's just a lot of ways that our philosophy is, it's very rare that we reprimand. It's just constantly, you hire emotionally intelligent people and they're picking up on the cues that, oh, this is what success, or this is what the leaders feel is important, and then they start acting accordingly.
Gotcha. I want to stick with you for this question too. And, you know, maybe you can both answer this, but as leaders, you're expected to be able to pivot quickly. You're expected to be able to be adaptable to changes on a whim. But how do you embed that kind of resilience into the culture of your company so that everybody is able to adapt? Because, you know, you've got people out, you know, they're not close to you like you just were talking about, Ryan. Like they have to be able to pivot themselves. How do you bake that into the culture of your company? Well, I guess, Neal, you can start with you.
Well, again, it's a little easier for me because I don't have private equity that tells me I got to be at 100 million or 200 million. So if you're a slow and steady win the race kind of guy, and I've been going 8 to 10% a year, there's not that much change that goes. I mean, there's change that goes on every year, but it's just tweaking and maneuvering. And then, of course, every few years, it's a bigger, innovative type change that we have to figure out what we're doing. But so I'm probably not the best. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize, but there isn't drastic cultural changes that I have to make year over year. And I don't have my goal is not to grow more than 15 or 20% in any given year. I know it sounds weird, but I actually don't want to grow that much because I worry about the values and the impact on the staff, and then too much change and people have a hard time adapting. So they don't even realize that they're changing sometimes. I mean, we're doing it, and they're just kind of doing it. Next thing you know, they're doing it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say for us, I think the pandemic was a great example of having to pivot so quickly. And I think it really starts, I heard the term leading from the edges. Our mistake was, everything led from the top, but really leading from the edges. And I think the way you can do that or are able to do that is just allowing this opportunity to try and fail and learn, right? And I think some of the best teams, it's been proven, are the ones that have this sort of psychological safety to be able to share what they want, try what they want. So I think really being intentional about creating that type of culture with our employees is that let's try to do something. What do we need to do? And if we fail, that's okay, and we'll learn from it. Just don't fail too big, but learn from it and fail forward. And I've always had a saying that more is lost in indecision than the right decision. I think we've heard that sort of phrase before in other talks too. So I think that's the big thing, is just try, because you can always learn from it. It's not a failure. It's only just a recipe and building blocks for future success.
We've talked about good pay. We've talked about benefits as components of making sure your employees feel valued in your organization. I'm wondering, from both of your perspectives, what are some lesser known things that you may do that you do intentionally to make sure that your employees feel valued in your organizations? And in what innovative ways are you cooking, what are you cooking up basically that you could amend some of those interesting things as well?
I think this is a great time to explain the Rolly Club.
Go ahead.
Okay, because I saw some faces like, what the heck is a Rolly Club? So it's a Rolex Club. And we didn't term it the Rolly Club. That sort of grew organically through people that started earning the Rolex. And this is, I would not take this as a strategy to take to your board about doing it. It's just something that grew organically that we've been doing, because we didn't really think we were going to be doing this a whole lot. So the Rolex Club is, if someone hits 10 years with 24-hour home care, they get a Rolex. And for us, it was more of like paying homage to, your grandfather. He worked for the company for 25, 50 years. He got the gold Rolex. And we always thought, oh, it'd be cool. In 10 years, we had a few people that were going to hit their 10-year mark. It'd be cool to do a Rolex, right? Because something you can pass down to your kids, and it's like a really special sort of token appreciation. And we're all in home care here, so like home care 10 years, you have to multiply it by 2 or 3 years, and that's really like dog years. So really, they've been with us for basically 50 years if you're using home care years. So we thought 10 years was a good mark. And yeah, our first employee that we ever hired hit the 10-year mark, and we gave him a Rolex, which we thought was really special. In the grand scheme of things, the Rolex may have cost us $5,000, $6,000, but how much more does that Rolex go than just giving him a bonus of $5,000 to $6,000? Right. The unfortunate thing is the Rolex prices have gone up significantly, and we can't really backtrack on that. I think the Timex Watch Club, it just doesn't have the same ring. But we always thought, okay, how many of these are we really, gonna be giving out? Because we hire a lot of younger folks, a lot of millennials, and the thing is, they leave pretty often. But this week we're going to be giving out our 14th Rolly, cool. Which is pretty cool. So you have these people that have been with us for so long. So $5,000, or maybe it's now closer to $10,000. It's a drop in the bucket for the value that they've brought to the company for 10 years.
Yeah. Neal, some lesser known things or some less obvious things that you guys do at Family Nursing?
I mean, this sounds odd. I was sharing with somebody last night that our most junior executive has been with us for 8 years. And I have an executive team and directors, and so it's almost the point that might not be that healthy. Because I have a culture where you promote from within. I'm not a big fan of bringing people from the outside, and so people know whenever an opportunity is available or as we grow, then different positions present themselves. So we have a lot of, a lot of tenured staff that stick around, and they're amazing. I mean, they're very devoted, very committed. You would think it's their own company. And anyhow, but we do, going back to my view of the number one customer is back to the caregiver side, just real quick, is, I give our coordinators, the schedulers, a sizable carrot budget for them at every opportunity they get, of every compliment they get, of every discussion that a family or daughter or son has with them about how amazing the caregiver is. that caregiver is going to get rewarded. They're going to get a gift card, they're going to go online, they're going to pick their choice, like whatever it is. But to the point where the caregiver is like, hey, did the daughter call you? Because they want my gift. You know, like, I mean, I love the fact that's their, and I like the fact that it's an expectation on their part, because I want to reward success. I want to reward it. And then, of course, in our business and private pay, especially, I mean, retention is huge. And so if the caregiver's happy and the client's happy, so it all just kind of feeds on itself. And that's just one of, if we had more than the amount of time available, one example.
Right. Stick with you. We do have just a few more minutes left here, but you guys are in an industry that requires trust with your clients, with the community, et cetera. But it also requires trust amongst your caregivers, your employees. How do you, Neal, and I'm sure Ryan, you'd like to chime in on this as well. How do you create that culture of trust from within and maintain it, nurture it, care for it, et cetera?
I mean, just being who you are. We're just people. I mean, we said earlier, we're gonna mess up, I'm gonna mess up. I'll tell anybody along the way, it's gonna happen. I put my pants on every day. Like, we're just people trying to make a difference. And so in our company, you actually get reprimanded for silence, and not, if you don't speak up, that's on you, because you have a responsibility. If you see something that is not right or doesn't feel right, doesn't mean the employee always gets their way, but they have a responsibility to tell us when something isn't right. And it's literally on their performance review where you suffering in silence, like, and that's not
right.
A healthy organization. And so that's one way. And I would say on the client side, I mean, I mentioned we're big into feedback, and so we do a tremendous amount of we schedule with our families. We call them deep talks. You know, like every quarter, you know, let's get it on the calendar, and their liaison with our company knows at 4:15 on Tuesday of this quarter is going to be like, and so it's like not just, oh, how's your caregiver, you know, and then let me schedule and go on to the next thing, and not really care, like deep emotional connections with the families, because the adult children or the spouse, I mean, they're going through a lot. And sometimes they need an ear. And oftentimes, and I staff this group of people as social workers, so they're used to really taking in what the families are feeling.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it's just overly communicate. I learned that sometimes silence can be not so great because I do believe a lot of our employees will fill that void with probably negative thoughts. And I'll share a quick example. So for our senior care, our private pay side of the business, I was running it at the time, and I would send out every single Tuesday my Tuesday thoughts on Teams. And it's just 5 bullet points of just what's on my mind and the direction of the business. So they got that every single Tuesday. And I passed the reins over to one of our new presidents who's taken that over. And he was sort of learning the ropes. He was meeting with individuals, and he forgot, or he didn't forget, he just didn't do the Tuesday thoughts. And all of a sudden, all these rumors are popping up about, oh my God, we're selling the business and we're shutting it down because Tuesday thoughts weren't being published. So he learned his lesson, and now he took it a step further, and now he does a video recording every week or every other week and just gives them a similar message. So I do think communicating, and from a company level, we are very, again, using the word intentional about that. We have an all hands that we address the whole company. And then we like to follow that up with town halls where we will have everybody in the company, if they choose to, come and ask questions. And no question is off the board. You can answer it. And if we don't know the answer to it, we'll find a way to figure out how we can answer it. So I think just having that open form of communication with your team is important, and being consistent about it as well.
Awesome. Well, with that said, perfect timing. We're out of time. Let's hear it for Neal and Ryan.